In this lesson, I'm going to show you how to use 4 different shading techniques to add texture to your drawings. We're going to have a new series of tutorials about textures and patterns. And even though you may find many tutorials about shading techniques in this platform, I wanted to include it in this series because we might want to refer back to some of the concepts we mentioned in this tutorial. So for this video, we're going to explore some different textures and patterns like hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and some other types of textures, and just learn to use those in a way to create three-dimensional forms. So for the first column, I just do a regular tone of shading, just like the method we use to shade our drawing typically. I added this one on top so you can compare it to the other methods. The first one is hatching. Hatching is when you have parallel lines that do not cross over each other in order to create the illusion of the tone. They can be going in any direction, up, down, on an angle, straight or slanted, but the best way is to use them to follow the form. If you want to pick a suitable pencil, just make sure it's not too light, because you want to be able to see what you're doing, so maybe a 4B or a 2B is a good choice for this practice. And just to start making some lines, you can go over top of them as well. So you can always go in and darken this up by either using a darker pencil or by putting your lines a little bit closer together. So we can go back and add additional lines. The amount of space left between each line determines the overall tone or value. You can clearly see here that the higher the concentration of lines, the darker the tone or the value. So the more space left between lines, the lighter the value is perceived. So that was hatching. It's almost like shading, but with lines further apart. Then we've got cross-hatching. You might be more familiar with this one. There are actually tons of tutorials about it everywhere. Cross-hatching is when you do parallel lines that cross over top of each other in different directions. Cross-hatching begins in the same manner as hatching. The only difference is that with cross-hatching, the lines cross over each other the more frequently. In order to make values darker, you can use a darker pencil like a 6B. You can press harder, you can place your lines closer together, or you can make more layers of your lines. These lines cross over each other, the darker the value when cross-hatching is used compared to hatching, because you can always layer additional strokes over the top of the marks that you've already made. These cross-hatching don't have to be exactly perpendicular. The next texture technique is called stippling. Stippling is probably the most time-consuming one. With stippling, you're doing little countless dots on the drawing surface. The closer you put your dots together, the darker your value will be. You can also use a darker pencil or use a little bit of a pressure. Some people like to bring their hand way up and like pound the paper with their hand like this. But that's gonna take you a lot longer and be more distracting. The time that it takes you to lift your pencil up and down is quicker if you don't lift it as high. I tend to keep my eyes open for any little areas that look like they're empty when I'm doing stipple. This one will probably work better with a softer pencil because you'll get bigger marks as it starts to become more blunt. As we mentioned for the two top textures, the higher the concentration of the dots, the darker the perceived value. The more space left between the dots, the lighter the perceived value. In most circumstances, this approach is used for pen and ink instead of graphite. But if you use a graphite that's soft enough, then you can produce some attractive results using stippling as well. Use it more on the tip, you'll get more of a round dot. If you use it more on the side, you'll get like a dash or little arrows there. The last technique we'll discuss, which is my favorite, is definitely the quickest way to layer marks on a surface. This method is using scribbled lines or random lines. In this method, we use super uncontrolled different directions. Sometimes I'm going kind of squiggly clockwise, and sometimes it's counterclockwise. You can do scribbles with circular motions. This could be another type of texture that we could use. So it's actually like getting sort of circles like curly here. Circling occurs when small circular strokes are made with a pencil in a circular motion. Depending on the position of your hand, these circular strokes may be circular or they may be more oval-like. Just try to fill up this base with squiggly looking scribbles. The more frequently we have lines that cross over each other, the darker the value. This method is great for sketching or laying down visual information quickly. It can even be used to create a finished drawing. So hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, and scribbles. Now these sets of marks themselves can make quite a nice pattern to add on top of something you're drawing. You might be able to start to make some kind of pattern by joining them together. So it means we can also mix these textures to get a drawing with a strong layering of textures. So determine a light source for your drawing, and just like the way you used to shade, instead of a continuous consistent layer of graphite, try to apply these textures to shade. This is just a practice now. We're going to work with these textures a lot in the future. I just want you to get familiar with some terms and techniques here and how to use them. So sometimes you might want to bring a bit more energy to your drawing. Instead of just using shading, you could use these textures to add on top of your shading. Say you're shading a lemon and you want to bring more texture, and or maybe you're shading something else with texture, and you want to be able to add those textures to your drawing in a way that enhances the three-dimensional form. So each one of these textures could be used overlaid over top of your shading. For example, suppose we're shading a tree trunk or a berry bush or something else. We can use a scribbly texture over top of our base shadings. But these textures can also be used on their own to shade with. One great thing about all of these techniques is that this is something that you can use with a pen or some kind of media where you're not able to blend like you can with the pencil or colored pencil. So this is great for artwork in pen or ink or marker or anything like that. But knowing how to use graphite to its fullest potential is important to enhance your drawing and bring it to the next level. After using these techniques, you'll notice it on your drawing. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and don't miss the next tutorials because we're going to work with the textures later.